Okay, so where we left off is you're able to log in, successfully authenticate the user. Now we just need to create a session. And in our case, we're not actually going to use sessions, we're going to use tokens. Okay? And so the way this works is when the user logs in and provides their login credentials, it's going to match that up against the database. And if it succeeds, if it finds it, if it matches, we're going to provide a token. And basically what a token is the user's information, just username and email or whatever we want it, but it's not going to have the password or anything sensitive. And it takes it and it encrypts it as a cookie and saves it in the client's local storage, or in other words, in the browser. And so we'll use that to keep track of the user's activity, such as if they're logged in, if they're logged out, they can close the browser, open it back up. It's still going to have them logged in because it stays there in the local storage. Okay. So the first thing that we want to do is go into the backend folder app and into our routes API file. And so what we need to do is this is the route that we created to log the user in. So what we need to do is after the user logs in, give them that token. And so what we'll need to do first is if we go to this website, just search node JSON Web Token. That's what we're going to be using. We need to go ahead and install it first. Okay, so we'll just copy this line and make sure you type in save and go ahead and install that. Okay, and then don't forget to use the required line here and then go ahead and paste it at the top. Okay. And so in order to create a token, we can use any one of these. I prefer this one because it has an expiration set to it. Okay. And so what we'll do is I'll just paste it down here at the bottom. Okay. And so we want to give them this token once the password has been validated. So right above this success true, okay, we'll go ahead and create the JSON Web Token. So we'll say JWT.sign, and it's going to be an object. Okay, so what this first row right here, where it says data foobar, this is the data that we want to encrypt into the token. Okay, and so afterwards, after a user receives the token, so on the front end, we can decrypt it and get whatever information. But we don't want to put anything in there that's sensitive, like passwords. So we'll just use username, and so it's going to look like this. And then, whoop, not password, password dot email. Okay, and so we have to put that user in there because remember we're working off of the user object up here. Okay, and so we tell the JSON that we're providing a username and that we're providing an email, and we map it to the current user's email and username. Okay, and so this portion right here, secret, that is something that you use to basically provide extra security to your token, right? Only your token will have that secret. So you want to make it as complex and as complicated as possible, but something you're going to remember. So I'll just create my own up here. I'll name it secret. And then for testing purposes, I'll just make this something simple like Harry Potter. Okay. Feel free to make your own. And so after this object, go ahead and type in comma. And instead of doing the quotes like this, we'll just pass that variable like this. Followed by another object, and it's going to say expires in. Now it's a good idea to provide a expiration time for your token because you don't want them to last forever, although I think some websites have like ridiculously long expire times or maybe none at all. But anyway, I'm going to tell the application to expire this JSON Web Token after 24 hours. So after 24 hours, this token will no longer be usable. And so within that 24 hours, they can close the browser, As long as they don't clear their settings or clear their history, whatever, this token will remain in that storage. So next what we'll do is in this JSON response here, we'll also respond with the token. And so the way you do that is just comma, token, and token. And so that's kind of how JSON works, right? It's always key value pairs, so the key and then the value. That's why we use the username up here, and down here we use success and message, and then here we're using token and token. And then don't forget, if we provide this in a token variable, of course we never created that variable, so let's go ahead and do that up here. Okay, so we've assigned this token to the token variable, and then we're returning it to the user in a response. So go ahead and make note of this path, this route, because we're going to access it. So go ahead and pull up Postman or Arc, whatever you're using, and type in the route, which is API Authenticate. Okay, and then ensure to pass in your username, David, and password. Now, when you go to the route, if you have the correct credentials, in addition to what we were getting before, now we're getting this token, right? So we're getting these three things from the JSON object, okay? Okay, so now what we want to do is we can go ahead and close that up. What we want to do is take that token and now save it in the browser, right, in the storage of the browser. So we're going to shift to the front end, okay, because this has to be done on the front end. Of course, it's the client, the browser, and go into Apps and Services, Auth Services, okay. And so we're going to create a new factory, so go ahead and delete that semicolon, type in factory, and we're going to name this one Auth Token. And pass in a function. Okay, and just like before, we're going to go ahead and create our object, and we're going to call it Auth Token Factory. And then we're going to return it Auth Token Factory. Okay. And so so we're going to go ahead and create our custom function for setting a token. And so the way we do that is we type in, go ahead and create your function. We'll name it setToken, right? Function. And we'll say, of course, we'll have to pass in the token. And then we'll say window.local storage set item. Okay, this is an Angular thing. And we'll say token. Okay, and so when we invoke this, and it's going to look like this, authToken.setToken. When we invoke this, it's going to save that token in the local storage of the browser. Okay, so we'll comment this out for now. So now we need a way to get the token first, right? So up here is where we authenticate the user, all right? So let's go ahead and get the token from this data, okay, once we log in. And so what we'll do is we'll type in then, and then we'll pass in a function that grabs that data, and make sure you type in return data. And so for right now, we'll just log it to the console to see what it looks like, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. And so we'll just go back to the browser, refresh, type in your credentials, and you'll see the user object is logged to the console right here, right? So let's take a look at it. So inside of data, we'll see the message, the success, and then here is our token, right? So in order to grab that, we'll use data.data.token. So what that looks like is like this, data.data.token. And I like to test this to make sure that I'm correct. It saves us a lot of trouble. So we'll just log in again and make sure. There we go. We have our token. So now we can grab it and set it in the browser. So what we'll do is we'll use this function down here that we created. Okay. And instead of token, it's going to be data.data.token. Okay. Okay, and so we could test this now. However, we're not really going to see anything different. And so what we'll do is we'll sort of create a way to test this, right? And so one additional function that we'll need to create here is get token, right? So we set it, but we also need to grab it in order to check, the user's data. So we'll say auth token factory dot get token, and function. Okay. And then we'll say turn local storage get item token. So this function is going to reach into that local storage and grab that token for us, and then we can do whatever it is we want with it. So it's going to be auth token, get token, just like that. Okay. And so we'll create a new function up here, and it's going to be auth factory. We'll say is logged in, right? So this is going to be our custom function that tells us if the user is logged in. And so the way we know that is by trying to grab that token from the storage. If it doesn't return anything, then we know the user's not logged in. There's no token set. So we'll say if auth token get token is true, then return true that the user is logged in. Else return false, the user is not logged in. Okay. And so this one is going to look like this. It's going to be auth dot is logged in. We don't need to pass anything. Okay, so go ahead and go into your main controller. Right, remember this is a controller, it controls the main index. And so what we'll do is above login, we'll do a check. We'll say if it's true that the user is logged in, then log to the console user, we'll say success, user is logged in. And then we'll say else console log failure, user is not logged in. And so the way this is working is basically what we're doing is when the page loads, we're going to invoke this is logged in function. And what that does is it invokes the get token, which is down here, and so basically the simple version of it is when the page loads, we reach into that local storage with get token, we grab it if it's there, and if it is, return true. And so that's how we tell the controller, yes, the user is logged in. Okay, so we're not doing anything with the token as of right now. We're just checking to see if it's there. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that and hit refresh. And actually, I forgot to pass auth token in our controller. So go back into auth services, and so right here we have to pass auth token. And the reason for that is because we're using it here, but we never referenced it. So these different factories have to reference each other if ever used. But we don't use auth down here, so we don't have to pass that into the function. So go ahead and hit refresh. And oops, forgot another one, window on auth service. Okay, so that's down here where we use the window. So I'll go ahead and paste that into the function and then hit refresh and see if we're good to go now. Okay, and we are. And you'll see it says success, user is logged in. Okay, and we can go to a different route and hit refresh. It's going to continue to say that. Why? Because in our local storage, it has that token saved. Okay. So we need to provide an option for logging out, correct? So go ahead and in your auth services, create that function, and we'll just name it log out, right? Okay, so in order to do this, we need a way to remove that token, right? To destroy that token. So what we can do is, in this set token, we can change it to have an option to remove, right? And so the way we do that is we say if token is true, meaning if the token was provided or passed in, which it is up here, then go ahead and set it. Otherwise, window local storage dot remove item token. So what this does is, if we pass in this function, right, so what we'll do is copy this one, and inside of logout we'll go ahead and pass that. So if we remove the token from the parentheses, it's no longer going to set the token, right? So that's what this one does, sets it. But this one isn't going to set it. What it's going to do is this else. It's going to remove it from there, okay? So let's go ahead and see that in action. So it's going to be auth.logout, okay? And so now we can pass that in the main controller, and so we'll just create a new one. Let's go ahead and do it down here. We'll say, say this dot logout function, okay, and then we'll pass that that logout function there. And so what we can do after that is, what I like to do is redirect the user. So go ahead and go into views, and under pages, users, create a page for logging out, right? So we'll just say logout.html, and then go ahead and create that div class page header, and then we'll say logging out okay. So make sure you go into your routes and you add that new page. So we'll say .when/logout template URL app views pages users logout.html. Okay. Go ahead and hit save. And so down here, after the user presses logout and it uses that function to remove the token, we'll redirect the user. So we'll say location.path logout. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and use timeout to direct the user back to the home page after 2,000 milliseconds. Okay, so redirect to home. Okay. So now we need to go ahead and assign this to a button on the index. So go into your index and scroll down to the navigation bar and go ahead and create a new one. Say, we'll just pass in a hash and we'll say logout, and then we'll say ngCloak main.logout. Okay, so if you hit refresh, you'll see that it still says user is logged in. So here we have our new button, so we'll go ahead and press that. Oh, we forgot to reference timeout, sorry. Actually, I think what it is I misspelled timeout. So going back here, yes I did. Okay. Hit refresh on there. Okay, now you'll see failure user is not logged in, right? Because even though the timeout portion of this didn't work, the removing of the token did. So go ahead and sign back in. Okay, then I'll hit refresh and I'll see their user is logged in. Okay, and so now I'm going to test the logout button, make sure it works. Okay, so and actually I just noticed one little error, another error I made back in the routes file. I misspelled template URL, so it's actually template URL. You always want to be careful with these. And so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and log back in here. Then hit refresh so I get this success users logged in. Okay, and so now I'm going to test out my logging out. Please wait. There we go. So that's how we want it, right? Okay, so now what we want to do is, now that we have login, logout, we need a way to get the current user, right? We need to know, we need to decrypt that token now and see who's logged in so we can maybe display their name or their profile, whatever. And so the way we do that is we have to go into our API, back into our backend folder. And so we have to create a new route that gets the current user, right? This one logs them in. We just need a new route that gets the current user. Okay, and so what we'll do is we'll say router.post, and we'll just name it me, or you can do current user, whatever you want. Pass in request response, and we'll test it by sending back testing route. Okay, so let's go ahead and try that out in Postman. We'll go API/me, hit send, and there we go, testing me route. Okay, so we need a way to get this token decrypted and then send it back to the user here. Okay, and so the way we do that is we create a middleware. Okay, and so remember, middleware in Express is created like this, use, and then we'll pass in a function, takes a request, a response, and then this one's going to also have next, because that's what we use for middlewares. Okay, so how do we get the token? Well, so what we do is we can grab it one of three places, right? We can either get it from the request, or we can get it from the URL, or we can get it from the headers. Okay, and so what we'll do is we'll assign that to a variable, token. And so once this token is detected, we want to go ahead and verify that it is indeed a valid token. Whoops, here goes my misspelling again. And so back on the JSON Web Token website, there's a bunch of ways to do this. So I'm just going to grab one of these. They're all pretty much the same. Go ahead and grab this one. Paste it at the bottom here. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll say if token is true, meaning if there is one, then verify token. Else, if there is no token, then of course we'll respond with JSON object saying success false, message, no token provided. Okay. Okay, and so let's go ahead and do our verifying of the token. So at this point we have the token and it's assigned to the variable. So we'll go ahead and just follow this example down here, and we'll say jwt.verify, and so it's going to be token, comma, and then this is that secret that we created up here. So you can just type in that variable if you did that. Okay. So token / secret, and then function error decoded. So we'll say if error, then respond with JSON, success false, and message will be, if there's an error, that means the token wasn't verified. And so we'll say token invalid. And so just to give you a quick example, this could happen if, say, after 24 hours, the user tries to access this me route and it's expired. They'll get to this step, it'll detect the token, but once it tries to verify it, it'll give an error and respond with, sorry, it's not valid anymore. And actually, forgot to enclose this in brackets, so let's go ahead and do that now, because we are going to need an else. And so at this point, this is our success. This is our, we have a token, we verified it, it's good to go. And so what we'll do is we'll assign that token to a local variable that we can use and pass to this route. And so the way we do that, if we just type in rec.decoded and assign decoded. Okay, so now this is accessible down here, and so what we'll do is instead of sending this back, we'll send back rec.decoded. Okay, and so what this decoded means is it basically takes the token, combines it with the secret, verifies it, and once it's good, it sends it back decoded. And what decoded means is it sends you back the username and the email, because that's what we and the secret, because that's what we implemented into it. Okay, it's not actually going to send us the secret though, because we specifically said just username and email. The secret is just used for verification. So after this, you don't have to respond with anything. You can just say next, and that will let the application continue on to this route and then grab that variable. Okay, so let's go ahead and test that out and see. And so if you'll see, if you try to access this same route that was spitting back the test me route, it's not going to work because no token was provided. Okay, so you'll notice you'll have to get that token first, and so you'll have to go back to the authenticate state, right, and get a token back. So go ahead and provide the right credentials and then hit send, and then here we go, we have a token to use. So go ahead and copy that and then go back to the me route. And so what we can do is go ahead and head into the headers and then type in key access token, and then go ahead and enter anything just so we make sure that it's reading and that it's saying invalid token. And there you go, token invalid, because it read it but it doesn't match what the token should be. So we'll go ahead and paste in that valid token that we know to be valid because we just got it, hit send. And there we go, it sends you the decoded, basically the object of the unencrypted token. So now we can pass this to our front end application. So so let's go ahead and spit this out on our controller. So if you go back into the front end folder, public, and go into your services inside of auth service, we need a new function to get the user from that token, right? So we'll say auth factory dot get user function. Okay. So we'll use the get token function down here, and so we'll say if auth token is true, or if get token is true. In other words, if we're able to get that token from the local storage and it's true, then go ahead and return the current user, which is this route, API / me. Else, then we'll just use something in Angular that's q.reject, and so we reject the response, or I'm sorry, the request, and we'll say message user, or we'll say user has no token. Okay. So that's going to look like this, auth.getUser. Okay. So let's go ahead and go into our controller, our main controller. And so if the user's logged in, then we want to do that. Okay, so we'll just paste it here. So if user's logged in, then get that current user. Otherwise, then don't. So right now, this isn't going to show anything. So what we'll do is we'll say then, and then we'll pass in a function with the data, and then we'll just log that data for now to see what it looks like. Okay, so go ahead and go back into the browser and hit refresh. So we're not logged in, so it's not getting the user, so go ahead and log in. Okay, and then hit refresh to activate that. And there you go, it returns that object. Only now you're going to see that it says no token provided. Well, how can that be? We know we have a token, right, because we logged in. So the reason for this is because we're missing a step. And so what we'll do is go back into our services, into auth service. We need a way to attach tokens to every request. Okay, And so the way we do that is we're going to create one last factory that's going to be called Interceptors. Interceptors. Sorry, my spelling is really bad. Okay, and so this is the factory that we're going to use to attach, to check for tokens upon every request. And so go ahead and create your Interceptor Factory. I'm just going to copy this and paste it. Factory object, and make sure to return that. Okay, so we're going to create a function. Let's name it say request. Okay, and then we'll pass in a config, and you'll see why in a minute. Make sure to return that config. And so we'll assign, first let's get the token, right? So the way we do that is we saw before auth token, get token, right? That's this one right here. It's going to grab that token if it exists. Okay, if it exists. And so don't forget to pass in auth token up here. And so we'll say if that token does exist, then assign it to the headers. And so the way we do that is we say config.headers x access token, and then assign token. Okay, and so that's how we assign the tokens to the headers, and then we'll be able to grab it and then decode it and know that the user's logged in. So one last thing to do with this is inside of our main app configuration, we have to add in a configuration, right? This is where that config comes into play. So we'll say function, and so we're going to use something called HTTP provider, something in Angular, and so we'll say HTTP provider. And actually, let me go back into this. I want to copy and paste this long name. So we'll say Interceptors push, and then we'll paste that in there, right? So in other words, this is configuring the application to intercept all HTTP requests with this factory that we created, which basically assigns the token to the header. Okay, so go ahead and hit refresh and check your object now. And see, now it's not empty. Now it's actually providing all the data that we needed. Okay, so now let's manipulate this data how we need. So first, go back into your main controller, and we'll say data.data.user. We'll say username. Alright, we don't need the email for right now. Go ahead and hit refresh to make sure that's working. Okay, there we go. We got the username, which mine is David. So now we can do something with that, right? So what we'll do is we'll create a variable, name it, well, let's just name it username, right? Username. Okay, so now we can access the username on the front side. So go into your views and open up about and home, and then where it says hello, go ahead and insert the Angular brackets. We'll say main.username. Okay, and go ahead and do the same on the about route. Okay, and so go ahead and give that a refresh, and you'll see now we have the username, and then we can go to the home, and again, see in there. Okay, and so I want to implement it one more place. If you go into the main index, go to your nav bar, and after logout at the very end, or actually, let's even do it after the drop-down menu. So we'll say right here, we'll say list, and we'll create a empty hash, and then we'll paste that in there. So let's see what that looks like. Hit refresh. Okay, and that's our username there. We can even type in or a little message or something, hello. Right. So there we go. And so if we hit log out, logging out redirects, okay? Now you'll notice it still has the username here and here even though we logged out. But if you hit refresh, you'll notice it disappears, right? So the reason for that is because it's requiring a refresh. So what we want to do is tell Angular, hey, every time a new view loads, check for that username variable. So the way we do that is by going back into the controller, and we're going to create something called RouteProvider. Okay, so go ahead and copy that. Pass that up here before I forget, and we'll say .on or I think it's RouteChange start. And then go ahead and pass in your function. Okay, so what this is going to do is anytime a new route is changes basically, or you go to a different view or route, it's gonna invoke everything within these brackets. And so what we'll do is we'll take this and we'll put it within those brackets. Okay. So go ahead and do that. Just gonna fix this up a bit. Sorry, I'm really meticulous with my code. Okay, so then hit save and let's see what this looks like. Go ahead and hit refresh. It looks like I made an error here. Okay, I see what I did wrong. I was thinking RouteProvider because that's what we use in routes, but it's actually RouteScope. So go ahead and change that to RouteScope. Copy that and then paste it over this one. Okay, so now let's see what that looks like. Go ahead and hit refresh. Okay, and then hit login to get that variable back up there. Okay, looks like I made one last error. Sorry about that. If you go back in, it's actually not RouteChange start, it's RouteChange start. Okay, go ahead and hit refresh there. Okay, and then you'll see we're logging to the console here, and here's our variable. Let's go ahead and go to a different route and see if it's still maintained. See, it's logging it now to the console every time that you go to a different route, rather than needing to hit refresh. So let's see if this variable disappears in this one when we hit log out. Okay, so it looks like we still have some fixing to do. So if you go down here, once what we want to do is, what's happening here is when you log in, right, and then you press that log out button, if you notice it's not clearing it, even though it is logging it here, so we know we're getting to this. But the problem is it's still maintaining that, right? Because this variable never got cleared. It still exists temporarily in the browser. So what we want to do is down here just say app username and then assign it to empty, or we can say false or something. But that'll work for right now. So go ahead and let's try this one last time. Hit refresh. Log in. David. Okay, and now let's hit log out and see if it goes away. Okay, and it does. Now, actually, let's go ahead and, I don't like this. I think it's doing that because it's an object. So let's actually change this to false. I think that'll fix it. Okay, so let's try to log in one last time. Make sure you hit refresh. Okay, there you go, and then log out. Okay, now it's setting it to false. Okay, never mind. So I think the only option is probably to set this to just a blank object or variable. So let's try that out and see. Okay, then let's hit log out. Okay, yeah, that's much better. Okay, no empty brackets or anything. So if you click on login, you notice this data is still here along with this message, right? So even though once you're logged in, this login page shouldn't even be viewable, I want to clear this out. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go into the login form. This is where our login form is, right? And once we have success and we change the pass and we leave the login page, what we'll do is we'll just empty the form, right? So we'll say app.login data and then we'll say empty. And then same with the success message. I think that one we can do false. So let's go ahead and try that out. Go back into login and hit refresh. Log in. And then head back over to log and see what it looks like. Okay, yeah, there we go. So now it's cleared, and that's how I like to see it. Okay, so one last thing that I want to do is I want to make this actually a clickable thing and maybe like pull up the user's profile. Nothing fancy, but so what I'll do is go into users and we'll create a new page called profile.html. And then let's go ahead and just type in anything to test it first. From profile route. Okay, and go into your routes file and go ahead and add it. Say when file plate URL app views pages users profile.html. Okay, and go into your index, and instead of having an empty hash where the username is, we'll just change that to profile. Okay, let's test that out. Okay, so now what I want to do is just kind of display the user, a little, not a advanced profile, but just basic information. So what we'll do is we'll create a table. So go into profile, and we'll just say, well, first let's change this to profile. Actually, I can just change this to main.username, put an apostrophe, yes. Okay, and then we'll create a table. We'll say RTD. We'll say user name, user email. Okay. Create a new row. We'll say main dot username, and then dot user email. Now we actually haven't created this variable yet, so go into the controller. And up here where we created the username, let's go ahead and create an email one. So we'll say user email data.data.email. Okay. And let's see what that looks like. Hit refresh. Okay, and so I just realized I don't really like how this looks at all. So what I'll do is I'll just paste in another one that I created. Feel free to go ahead and copy. Looks way better. This is bootstrap formatting. Much better. So okay, once you're done copying that, just go ahead and give it a refresh and let's see what that looks like. Alright, this looks a lot better. So nothing really necessary, but I just like to create this just to give us an idea that we're going to be needing something like that further down the road. Okay, so one other thing that I want to do, if you notice, we're logged in right now, but it's showing the login and register button, which is uncommon for most websites. This is an easy fix. So what we can do is go into our controller, and we'll create a variable, and we'll say, where can we do this? We'll say right here, right? We'll say is logged in equals true. Actually, let's cut that out. I realize I don't want that there. Want that if it's success. And then the failure part, we'll just put false. Okay. So now we can use that variable on our index page. So go into your index, and so what we'll do, go to your nav bar, and we'll say for each one of these, right? So for login, we'll say ng show if main is logged in, right? So in other words, show only if logged in is true. So we'll just do the same. Actually, we don't want it to show if it's logged in. We want it not to show if it's logged in. So if they're not logged in, then show it. And we'll do the same for register. We'll say show if not logged in. And logout will show if logged in. So we'll say ng show main is logged in. Okay. And so for this hello username, whatever, we'll do the same thing. We'll say ng show if main.is logged in. Okay, so let's hit refresh and see what that looks like. Okay, it looks like I made an error. Okay, yeah, I accidentally typed in ngChange instead of ngShow. So let's go ahead and refresh on that. Okay, now you'll see that it's not displaying login and register, and when you hit log out, there it is. Okay, good. So we only have a couple more things to fix. First, let's get rid of all these console logs. We don't need them anymore. So go back into your controller and delete. So the other thing is, right, depending on your connection speed, if you hit refresh a bunch of times, you'll notice it temporarily shows the Angular stuff, right? And so, and even if you log in, right, let's say I log in. If you go ahead and spam that refresh, you'll see it temporarily shows the stuff even though we put ng show here, right? And it's just an Angular thing because the way the document works, it's going to load the HTML first, and then it's going to pull up all the Angular stuff. And so what you can do to test this is you go to network, and where it says throttling, go ahead and set that to GPRS. And Google Chrome has this. I don't know if other browsers have that. You might have to do a quick Google search. But basically what I'm doing is purposely slowing my internet connection in this browser for testing purposes. And so now if you hit refresh, it'll go much slower. And you really see all the links, right? And we don't want that, right? So one way to hide that is, whoops, didn't mean to click that. So we want to create a variable that says, we'll name it app load me, right? And so basically what we're saying is, at this point in our application, this is when we're ready to load, right? So we'll say once we get all the user's information, then we'll set load me to true. If we can't get the user information, well, then that's fine, but afterwards we can set it to true. And so what we'll do is right here at the very beginning, we'll set it to false. Okay, and so basically what the gist of this is, we're going to hide the HTML until this becomes true. Okay, so don't show anything until you get to this part, right? And by this time, we've already grabbed all the Angular data from the user. So back in our index, we're going to do two things. One, we're going to say ng show on the body, right? Because that's where all of all of our content is. And we'll say main.loadMe. So only show the body when loadMe is true. And then we'll add one last thing to it, and it's going to be ngCloak. Okay, and so go ahead and hit refresh. And see, now there's no flicker. Now it loads the entire page won't display until we've finished checking these Angular criteria up here, right? So I can go ahead and reset my connection to normal speed, and I'll just spam refresh to make sure that these Angular things aren't flickering. You see, now we don't have that problem because it's loading the whole entire page when we do the show hide, right? So we're sort of pausing it until it gets all the Angular. Okay, and so that's appropriate to do because we don't want to load our HTML before we've gotten our data, right? We want them to come at the same time, right? Or get our data first and then display the HTML, right? So that's it for this tutorial. I know it was kind of lengthy, but next what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to log in with Facebook, Twitter, and Google+.